Join me as we talk all things true crime.
Made contact and shattered.
Delivered to a missing 4-year-old. The parents have called in and advised that the mother had went for a walk, came home, now they can't find her, they've been yelling for her.
Turn it over to another agency. Let's get some help.
Where are your kids? They've been missing for 4 months. You have nothing to say? You're over here in Hawaii? Dad, where are Lori's kids?
4 were stabbed multiple times and were likely asleep during the attack. Some had defensive wounds.
Most of them had just like one that was the lethal stab wound.
Good morning. Hello, wherever you are today. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't hit like and subscribe, please do so. And chat, just let me know if you can hear me. I'm just going to play a little bit of this grub truck video just to take us back to the night of the crime. And good morning, everybody in chat. I see you all. Hello, Adrian. I saw Derek, Melmac, Florida Bass Fishing, House Huddled. So good to see everybody. So as soon as I get the okay from chat, I will continue on with everything I have to say. Okay, cool. Thank you, Music City Mom, too. She said she hears me loud and clear. Okay, thank you, guys. So I just, have been going through, obviously, the Bryan Kohberger case and the latest motions by the defense asking for requests from the 3 officers. Training records struck my interest very much so. There's even been people who are digging into those officers. Some have even pulled out some questionable police work from one of the ISP officers. It's been very interesting this past week just going through this case. Pretty much the live stream today, I'll be getting into my new theory in a pre-recorded video, but all my research from this point on is probably going to be based on my newest theory in the case. And not much has really changed. Like I do think that Bryan is connected to this, but I'm starting to see a different type of picture. And I want to lay that out for you guys in a pre-recorded video because it requires me using like context clues given to us by the media and by law enforcement. And I just want to lay it out in a concise manner in something that just makes sense. But today we're just going to be talking about the defense strategy and asking for these 3 training records from the ISP. And I believe there's one other officer, but I don't think they specified what agency he worked in. So it could be FBI, it could be Moscow, don't know. But pretty much a good defense strategy, as you all know, is to point wrongdoing at everyone else tied to the case and, just keep pointing at other people and away from their defendant the most that they can. We saw this happen in the Casey Anthony trial. We've even seen it in the O.J. Simpson trial where both defendants, I believe, and I think the majority of the public believe that those defendants are guilty. Not everybody, but I think the majority believe that O.J. and Casey Anthony are guilty. However, their legal strategy worked in their favor. So today we're going to theorize what Ann Taylor is doing for Bryan Kohberger's defense. And we're just going to source some of the O.J. trial today. So let me just play my little pre-recording and then we will just continue to pause it and to talk a little bit. And then I will be playing part of the O.J. Simpson trial specifically just to kind of look at their defense strategy and to kind of call into question that maybe this is the avenue that Ann Taylor is going down. So we'll just get right into it. And thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you guys. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Please hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Appreciate you so much. Thanks for being here.
We don't want to put our investigation in jeopardy by releasing what we have.
Fatal ones were to the chest area or the upper body area.
There's no damage to anything, and the door was still open when we got there.
The bodies were found in bed, suggesting the victims were attacked while sleeping. The coroner called the attack personal.
While editing together my documentary, something just stood out to me as super weird, and it was when Mark Fuhrman was commenting on the Idaho case. It struck me incredibly odd that Mark Fuhrman, the detective in the OJ trial, who used his Fifth Amendment right after being asked if he planted evidence or manufactured evidence in the OJ case, somehow was able to talk to the surviving roommates in the Idaho case.
The killer, for some reason, bypassed the rooms where the two young survivors were sleeping.
Their story was they heard partying, they heard noise, but they just, as usual, said, there's partying going on. They locked the door.
How was Mark able to come across this information? At the time, this information was not revealed to the public. This was before the PCA was given to any of us. And why would they lock the door if they had only heard partying? It's just very weird that Mark was out here on Fox News pushing this narrative, in my opinion. I started to see more similarities between the two cases. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the case is different. In fact, you'll see as we go through some of Mark's footage in the trial, the topic of racism is brought up, which obviously doesn't relate to Bryan Kohberger's case. However, I did find it interesting that both cases involve the victims being stabbed. And frankly, I believe that Bryan Kohberger's defense is going to be to question the integrity of the investigation and law enforcement from every angle. And I think that they're going to raise question to competency, which is what happened in the OJ trial. Maybe the defense is going to use a similar tactic and method to try to paint law enforcement in the Idaho case as perhaps being incompetent or something else. OJ allegedly even said something along the lines of, the reason I was acquitted at my criminal trial is the jury didn't believe the police. In OJ's case, the evidence against him was overwhelming, but the defense was able to call into question the credibility and the competency of LAPD. And I believe that Bryan Kohberger's defense will try to do the same, even though the DNA evidence on the sheath is overwhelming. And all it took was one cop in the OJ's case for the entire case for the prosecution to fall apart. We don't know if something similar will happen in the Idaho case, but I can guarantee that has something to do with Anne requesting training records. She could be hoping to stumble across something that could raise question to the jury.
Request number 6 in the first motion to compel, and that stems from discovery request 160, is training records. These are training records of 3 specific police officers. Your Honor, we have not asked for training records for every officer that has had anything to do with the case. I would not want to stand here and let the court think that this is an exhaustive list of the officers that we might need training records for. But these are 3 officers that we've requested them for, and the state has indicated they're not willing to give us the training records.
I also found it weird that it said that the state was not willing to give up the records without this court order. Why wouldn't they just hand them over for these 3 officers?
These 3 officers are officers that have each conducted critical interviews with critical witnesses in the case, made decisions about the interviews, made decisions about evidence, and conducted other kinds of investigations. We seek their training records to understand their processes. The training records, Your Honor, they are records that we've been able to obtain from various police agencies in the past. In this circumstance, are not records that I could find on my own. These are not things that are on the internet. They're not going to just hand them over to me. The 2 of the officers that we've requested them about are Idaho State police officers. I have often received training records for Idaho State police officers in the preparation of other cases during the course of my career. They are imperative for us to understand the specialty in.
And I, for one, thank you so much, Doug, for the super chat, and thank you for your kind words. Keep up the good work. Everyone, check out No Thanks Investigates if you're looking for more true crime. Also, I wanted to pass on my condolences for your dog. I seen him all the time on your live streams, and I know that he was definitely a part of the channel and a part of your family, and I'm sorry to hear about his passing. But yeah, I agree with you, Jen Lou. Like, why make it easy for the state? And honestly, the state isn't required to hand over every little thing until the trial. So they have time to kind of, make the defense fish for things. And I believe that that's what they have been doing, because in the motion before this one, they asked for something else. And the prosecution said something like, we handed it over to you, but it's sourced from something else. Like, pretty much didn't point them in the right direction, but said that they had it. So I found that interesting. Like, obviously they want the defense to dig. So that's sort of normal procedure. So yeah, I do think that they're just going to make it, hard for the defense, which makes sense. Everything like this is typical, courtroom banter, back and forth.
Interrogating and interviewing people, and for making the decisions that they made with regard to things taken as evidence in the case, or things followed up on or not followed up on.
And I don't know, I guess I could just elaborate a little bit more, even though I do in my pre-recorded thing, but somebody, Derek, it's just to carry on what I was saying about Mark pushing theories in the Idaho case that just were like new. Like, he was saying the roommates heard noises, they heard partying, but they just closed their door and locked it. And all this stuff was before the PCA came out. And it just strikes me, looking back and at the case in a different angle now, I'm like very confused why they had Mark go out on Fox News speaking on behalf of the roommates when we hadn't even heard really anything from them. We didn't know that Dylan had seen something that morning. So the fact that Mark had all this like knowledge on that aspect of the case, to me, is fishy. And when Inside Edition played the clips from Fox, they also had the prosecutor on that episode too. And he was just kind of talking about the roommates, like, oh, they're going to have important information, blah, blah, blah. And the police are already talking to him. And then they also, in that same segment, had like an explanation of why sometimes people are too afraid to call 911 or something like that, because obviously right off the bat, everyone wanted to know, why was there a delay in 911? And in that same like episode with Mark Fuhrman on there and the prosecutor, they just kind of hammered into our minds the theory that like, oh, sometimes you're just too afraid and you're just frozen in shock. And while I was very empathetic and like considered that theory for a very long time, something just clicked in my head last week. And I'm like, no, there's too much of that narrative being pushed in our face that I just think that there's something more to it. I do think that Kohberger is the guy, but I will explain more of my like theory on all that in my pre-recorded video. But let me just play a little bit more of this. And good morning, Melissa, Jade, and Titanium. It's good to see you guys. I'm so happy you're here.
That is the purpose for those records, and we're asking the court to order the state to provide the training records for those 3 officers.
Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffendorfer tweeted the other day, think about this, training records. These are not disciplinary records, so they will likely not be significant. Then why do they want them? I always ask for them in cases I work. I want to see if officers received training related to their investigative duties that they participated in relevant to the case. As an example, if they helped with interviewing, did they ever attend the Reed School or FBI training or any other training relevant to how to interview? The point is calling into question competency. When you don't have the facts on your side, you nitpick and divert from the evidence. Expect a lot of that in this case. Another thing I found weird about Mark speaking out about the Idaho 4 case is he was pushing the theory of Kaylee having a stalker, even though Moscow police indicated that they did not believe there was a stalker.
Moscow PD says it analyzed a reported incident from October and discounted claims that Kaylee had a stalker.
A new wrinkle, former LAPD detective Mark Fuhrman, yes, that Mark Fuhrman from the O.J. Simpson trial, now lives in Idaho and is claiming that victim Kaylee Gonsalves had a stalker.
I talked to one student, and I agree with this. It was twice removed from the person that said it, Kaylee. But Kaylee 2 months ago complained about a stalker.
Why was Mark interviewing people about the Idaho case? He says here he spoke to one student. For what reason is Mark interviewing students?
And just to follow that up, first off, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Derek, for sending through that members banner. I can't pull it up on StreamYard, but I really appreciate you being on the channel as a member for so long and all my members. And thank you so much, Mike, for the super sticker. I know that Mark wasn't doing interviews, like police interviews with people in this case, but the way he speaks is if he spoke to the first source, like I spoke with a student, blah, blah, blah. Like, why was he? I just don't understand why this guy who was up in another trial pleading the fifth about manufacturing evidence is speaking on behalf of the some student and like the surviving roommates. To me, it's just, it's strange. It's very strange. And it looks as though Fox has had him on as like a commentator for many years, even after the OJ trial. So I understand why he was on Fox News Network. It seems like he pops up on there here and there. But just his knowledge and the information that he has, to me, is just, it's just so close to things in the investigation that I'm just like confused how retired LAPD officer got this information. And I know that this is all before the gag order, but you know, it's just raises a lot of questions. And good morning, CDT. It's good to see you. And thank you all for your comments in chat. I hope you understand sort of what I'm trying to lay out. I just think it's strange that of all people and all that, this guy is coming out here with this narrative about the surviving roommates and pushing the narrative that we shouldn't think that it's strange that Dylan saw something and then locked her door. Now, he didn't say, because we don't know as a public in this interview, that she had seen Bryan Kohberger, but just knowing that he's saying they heard noises, they heard partying, but they just locked their door. And it's like, why would you lock your door if all the noises you heard was partying, you know?
A majority of people can agree O.J. Simpson is guilty. And the civil trial that took place after this criminal trial got their verdict correct when they concluded that O.J. was guilty. However, O.J.'s case, they were able to raise question with competency and corruption. And Mark was front and center for all of that. And I just really hope that nothing similar happens in the Idaho case.
Detective Fuhrman, would you please resume?
Exactly, Titanium Bill. I don't believe him either. And if you and me and whoever else doesn't believe Mark, then I guess we shouldn't believe that Kaylee really had a stalker. And I guess we shouldn't believe, which we know, that the noises that Dylan heard weren't partying noises. So right off the bat, we've already checked Mark on his statements regarding this Idaho case. Now we're going to watch them check him on the stand in the OJ case. And I just think it's fascinating. And, you know, just think about it. If this guy lacked credibility in the OJ case, then, like I just said, should we believe that Kaylee never had a stalker? But yet he's pushing that theory for what? For the state? Like, did the state get him to go on there? I know this sounds very conspiracy-like, but I'm just very confused where all this fits in. And then him trying to push like, oh, Dylan didn't see or nothing suspicious. She just heard partying and locked the door. Like that to me, I'm done kind of being like, well, you know, that these things happen. And half of that, half the reason why I really gave Dylan the benefit of the doubt was because of my own personal experiences. Like I've been in a state where I'm like frozen, like, you know, you think that you know that you would run or something, but like when you're there, you just don't. But I realized that I let my own bias dictate common sense. Like everyone has said that you should be calling 911. You know what I mean?
On the witness stand. All right, good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
You're reminded, sir, that you are still under oath. Mr. Ullman, you may proceed.
Detective Fuhrman, was the testimony that you gave in this case completely truthful?
I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Have you ever falsified a police report?
I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Is it your intention to assert your Fifth Amendment privilege with respect to all questions that I ask you?
Yes.
I only have one other question.
What was that, Mr. Ullman?
Detective Fuhrman, did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?
I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
And to circle it around, I just want to reiterate that I just find it very strange that this detective from the OJ trial popped up on Fox News speaking about the Idaho 4 case in a way that sounds like he talked to somebody close in the investigation, and even one of the surviving roommates, it sounds like. I also think that it's possible that the defense in Bryan's case could be trying a similar tactic that OJ's defense used when questioning competency and the investigation as a whole. Let's watch a little bit more of Mark in the OJ trial here.
And I definitely agree with you, Carol, freaking Claus. She said, I don't believe him. And in my opinion, for Dylan to want to lock her door, she had to have known something bad was going on. And according to the PCA, she did know something strange was going on, you know? So here, like I said, for them to put Mark out, you know, as their like little puppet on the media and push this theory of like, oh, it's nothing to see over here. She just heard partying and locked the door. And then also for him to say, well, I talked to somebody and he says something along the lines of like, and I believe it to be true. It's like, we didn't ask your opinion on it. Like, if you thought it was true, just tell us what you heard. And then he's like, Kaylee had a stalker. And all while Moscow is saying like, we don't have any evidence of a stalker. So I just wanted to lay that out there. Think it's weird. Now I do want to play some of this OJ. It's from Court TV. It was aired a year ago. It's really interesting. And they actually have Mark speaking in present time about it. And the reason why I just want to play it is because I think it's interesting to see a defense's strategy as far as, you know, like I said, I believe OJ is guilty. You know, the majority of people really did think so as well. But to see the defense team work in the manner that they did, to point fingers at, you know, an officer, Mark was only on the case for one day. And it was more than just the racist stuff that they pulled out from him. It was, you know, they questioned if he planted the glove, which he pled the fifth about. There was a blood vial that was, I guess, not handed into evidence in the appropriate time lot that Mark handled. So there was like a little things beyond just him, the racist stuff that they pulled out, which obviously doesn't relate to the Kohberger case. But I just want to say that the defense tried every angle they could in OJ's case. And in a sense, it seemed to have worked for their client because, you know, he got off on the criminal trial. He might not be in the best standing now, but I just, do you guys understand where I'm going with all this? I just really think the OJ trial is fascinating too. And I was hoping that you guys would want to watch some of this. And again, just to reiterate another similarity, you know, the victims were stabbed in both cases. In fact, there's a picture of Nicole that I'm going to have to kind of move the screen around on because it's too graphic and I just can't risk a community strike. I know Court TV can risk it, but I'm not going to risk it over here. So once I remove the screen for a second, I'm just going to be fast forwarding a crime scene pic of Nicole because it's too much. But at the same time, if you guys want to check it out, I think that it kind of gives you, I know this is morbid, but kind of would give you an idea of perhaps what they had seen behind closed doors in the Idaho case. Just very brutal.
With the millions of people following the O.J. Simpson trial, week 8 begins like many others. The prosecution calls a detective to the stand. But by week's end, the trial and this country are forever changed by what happens in that courtroom. The witness, Detective Mark Fuhrman. I'm Roger Kosek, and this is OJ 25.
Now, see how he's already introduced this episode of, Mark Fuhrman being the issue in a way, and House Huddle has a good comment. OJ prosecution didn't have their stuff lined up and ready to go, and it cost them that verdict. If this case isn't careful, it will happen again. And I fully believe that too, because like I said, the 3 officers that they're requesting training records, we already have a YouTube channel that's pulling out questionable behavior with one of them. Now, just because they did something here, they're just the defense is just going to point the finger and obviously away from their defendant any which way. So, yeah, I think that if the prosecution in Bryan's case doesn't have it lined up with the right car on the right CCTV footage at the right time, timeline is going to be key. And that's another thing that the defense, I think, will poke holes in for Kohberger's case, is the timeline. Whereas here in the OJ case, they might have brought it up, but it wasn't like a key thing for them to hone in on. I already foresee it happening in Bryan's case. People have already called into question the timeline themselves, And thank you all again for being here.
All right, the people may call the next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Detective Mark Fuhrman.
All right, Detective.
Yep, I think so too, Florida Bass, which won't apply at all in the Kohberger case. But for this one, it was just the perfect storm that of all officers, they have this one who has this terrible background. It was just bad. It was bad. Florida Bass Fishing says, I don't think it was the prosecution in regards to OJ's case. I think it became a race trial, and the defense did a good job making it a race trial, and also planting blood in his sock did the prosecution in, would be guilty. And we can't have any holes, anything like this in Bryan's case if we want a conviction, because the same method could be used and the same strategy could be used. Again, we don't have a race issue that will be arised in the Kohberger case, but say there is something, they're already questioning, how did you find this sheath? How did you find the DNA on it? How is this handled? And of course, they're entitled to know every step of the way. If you were on trial, you would want to know that everything was handled in a kosher way, right? So just like the OJ trial, had some mishandling of evidence, you could say, hopefully we don't see that in the Kohberger one.
Fuhrman?
I do.
Please have a seat with witnesses.
Mark Fuhrman, M-A-R-K-F-U-H-R-M-A-N.
Detective Fuhrman, can you tell us how you feel about testifying today?
Nervous? Reluctant?
Can you tell us why?
Throughout, since June 13th, it seems that I've seen a lot of the evidence ignored and a lot of personal issues come to the forefront. I think that's too bad.
Have you gone over your testimony in the presence of several district attorneys in order to prepare yourself for court and the allegations that you may hear from the defense?
Yes.
And in the course of that particular examination, sir, was the topic of your testimony concerning the work you did in this case, the actual visitation to Bundy and Rockingham, was that discussed?
No.
Did you receive a call at some point that night after you went to bed?
Yes, I did.
And what time did you get that call?
At 1:05 in the morning.
It's my boss, Ron Phillips, and he said, I've got 2 down, and I want you to handle it.
The north-south alleyway directly behind the residence had been blocked off with policemen at both locations to make sure nobody entered the crime scene from either direction.
Okay. So was there anyone moving around inside the crime scene tape when you got there?
No.
What were you able to see from your vantage point where the arrow is shown?
Now, see, they've already asked Mark, was there anyone moving inside the crime scene tape when you got there? Now, imagine that in Kohberger's case. And again, I'm going to have to remove the screen, not for this one, but yeah, definitely the next. Hold on, guys. But pretty much, already they've called into question who was behind the crime scene tape, like as you got there. They'll likely ask similar questions for Kohberger's. And we already know before the tape is even up, how many people were behind in the crime scene for Kohberger's case, So again, we can't help the way that things went in the Kohberger case, but it's going to be raised as, questionable in front of the jury. Like, so wait, the roommates got up and then they summoned friends over? So how many people were in the crime scene before law enforcement showed up after the 911 call was called, And we've already had the media kind of question the police about that themselves. Like, so wait, friends were summoned? And the media and Moscow police have come out saying, like, yes, as much as we wish that didn't happen, it did take 8 hours for the 911 call to come in. So if you're a jury hearing, the Kohberger case for the first time, and the defense is kind of giving their whole narrative of it, aren't you going to be kind of like, wait a minute? I mean, we all were stunned that it took so long, So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, let me just get the screen up again after these images are off.
And what did he point out to you, sir?
He pointed out the male victim, the long leaves at the feet of the male victim. He pointed his flashlight and said that there was a knit cap and a glove there also.
There was kind of a not a crisp read of the scene initially. You had to be able to put a few things together first. Who was the guy? How did she end up here? Why didn't she have any shoes on?
Tell us what else you see in this photograph.
I see shoe prints that appear to be dark and imprinted in what I believe to be blood that morning.
So you looked at this and there was drops of blood, there was shoe prints leading away from the female. So the conclusion was at least 3 people were involved in this crime. We have 2 victims and we have somebody that left, whether that was a victim or a suspect.
Detective Phillips and Officer Risky walked back out onto Dorothy, and I re-entered the house to start catching up on the notes from what had been shown to me so far and what I have observed.
And so what is the closest that you got to the bodies of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown at that time, 2 a.m. in the morning?
Standing above them on the top of the landing.
And exactly, Kate Danielle, what happened in the 8 hours is what I would like to know. And that's exactly what the jury is going to want to know. And that's exactly what the defense, I think, is going to hone in at is, how do we know that this didn't happen? And, it's a huge mystery in the case. And in my opinion, it's been kind of shoved down our throats that she was frozen in shock and people, maybe she was drunk and people pass out when they're drunk and maybe she just fell asleep. And it kind of just goes against everyone's instincts. And I think that the defense is going to really, really question DM. And I'm going to start referring to her as DM because I just think in the way that I think about the case now, I just find her very suspicious. And once I do my pre-recorded video and lay out my new theory, I think that I have legitimate reasons to think so. And I think that people have sort of been thinking that already. And good morning, Karen and Delana. It's good to see you guys.
Now, at some point, did you leave the location of 875 South Bundy?
Yes, we did. Well, I asked Officer Risky, I said, do you know the numbers for the Rockingham location?
And did he respond to you?
He said 360 north. Then I asked Officer Risky, what's the last major street before you get there? And he responded Cliffwood, but look real quick because you're going to miss it if you go around the corner too quick. All 4 of us exited the vehicle and stood around the Ashford gate. And I can't remember if it was Van Adder or Lang started ringing the buzzer at the gate.
And I agree, Caroline, the DNA at the sheen, how can you get around it? And same with the OJ case, you know, the glove, he had a history of DV with Nicole already. How can you get around those things in that trial as well? And yes, while Florida Bass Fishing pointed out that they brought up the issue of race, and this detective here, who I just have no respect for, in the sense that, you know, he lied. He went on the stand, he told his theory of everything, and then when he was brought back up on the stand, they asked him if he was truthful about everything he had stated, and he had to plead the fifth. It's like, you just admitted that everything you had said prior might not have been true, you know? So here we have this guy out on Fox News trying to tell us that, like, well, you know, the roommates heard partying, but they just locked their door. And it's like, okay. And I just think that the defense is going to raise all that in question too, even though, like you said, there is no excuse for his DNA at the crime scene. And I think that it could be the same thing in the Kohberger case as it is in the OJ case, where the defendant, in my mind, is guilty. I just really hope that Anne isn't going to try to bring anything up like they did in the OJ case that would look bad on any of the 3 officers that she's pulling training records from, or anything that they find out as evidence was processed, etc. I just hope that they've dotted their I's and crossed their T's. There was something else somebody said too that I wanted to pull up on screen. Oh, CDT said she was allegedly sober enough to be able to describe the suspect and very specific things she heard and where she believed the noises were coming from. Exactly. So we've all kind of toyed around with the idea of, like, well, you know, she might have been this, she might have been that. You know, we've even thrown the theory out there, well, maybe she had illicit drugs in her room, and, you know, she had to, like, she was afraid to call the cops because what's she going to say? Like, I thought somebody was going to steal these, or don't mind this sitting here, you know? So all that in my mind, I'm just kind of like, I'll keep it as a possibility. But my new theory is just, it just makes more sense. And we'll get to that theory soon, but I just want to keep continuing this whole cross-examination of Mark, because I think something similar could happen in the Kohberger case with a detective. I'm not saying that there's somebody with a racist background like Mark, but I'm just curious what type of avenue Ann Taylor is going to go down once she looks at these training records. And like I've said, there's already been channels that are pulling one of the detective ISP officers' names and looking at his history and cases. And there was something there's like an unsolved murder, and they went after the wrong person pretty much. So that's a different story. But Florida said, my issue is the roommate made eye contact with a stranger in a black mask. That negates the partying theory. Why did she wait 8 hours to call a friend? She didn't even call the police. Exactly. And, you know, it's too much to kind of try and understand. And I'm at the point where, like, it's just, I can't go against all of our instincts and just saying it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to do that. And you're right. She saw him in a mask. So where did Mark get this idea that she heard noises, she heard partying, but she just locked the door and went back to bed? Why was Mark out there pushing that theory? And which comes into my other question of, like, who put him out on Fox News with this information? You know?
Have 3 men that are standing at one doorbell, ringing it at a gate, a big gate, time and time again with no answer. It was killing me. I walked away like, I don't want to be seen being part of this. This is too silly.
I was just strolling along, looking at the house. Maybe I could see some movement inside.
Thanks for
So I'm
becoming a
walking
member,
down the
Thor.
street, and there's a white Bronco. And it just seemed like it was parked wrong.
Lon Cryer, a juror in the Simpson trial, keeps detailed notes, over 600 pages in all, chronicling everything he sees and hears in the courtroom. In the 25 years since the trial, he has never looked at the notes, until now.
Investigating detectives makes a decision regarding the recovery of evidence from the scene.
So you walked down Rockingham, and what did you do then?
Well, I was walking straight forward towards this white Bronco that was parked.
Claims he determined that the Bronco was hastily parked upon his arrival at the Rockingham residence based on the fact that it was the only vehicle on the street at the time and appeared to be jettied out in the rear as if someone had hurriedly parked and gotten out of the vehicle.
To me, it looked parked a little unusual for that type of parking.
After walking away back toward Ashford, Fuhrman called him back to Bronco to point out that blood-like spots above door handle on driver's side door of Bronco.
So MK, I'm curious with your comment there, and I totally agree. And in fact, CDT and myself and Alex Erickson in our group chat were saying the same thing. Some of the TikToks they made prior to this has me wondering, do you think that maybe Dylan wasn't as close of friends to the rest of them as maybe we all think, or that they've kind of made it seem? That's my question to you, because I'm wondering if we're on the same page. And yes, I agree, Karen, her actions or inactions make no sense. And sorry, guys, we're having like two different conversations, OJ and Bryan Kohberger, but I'm sure you guys can all keep up and kind of tie it together.
As I'm looking on the door, I see some little specks, some streaks of red that looks like blood.
While I'm reading it, I'm starting to realize how much the Bronco really meant as far as for whether they found blood or not in it. There was always some problems as far as for certain blood samples from that vehicle not being removed from the vehicle till weeks after it had went into the impound. So this is interesting. He's referring to the situation as the Bronco was still right there at the curve.
You were the most junior detective, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you in the best physical shape of the 4 detectives there?
Well, I don't. Kind of put me on the spot, but I think I was the tallest detective.
Okay.
I jumped the wall just to the left or east of the ice.
Okay, MK is on the same page, and House Huddle seems to be as well. Roommates don't equal, quote, friends. And I just wanted to bring that up because do you guys remember, and this was something that I noticed when I was editing my documentary, Ethan's mother says something along the lines of, Ethan was just staying the night at his girlfriend's house, who is one of 5 girls that live in the house. And the way that she said, like, one of 5 girls, like, I don't know, it just has always stood out to me. Like, it almost seemed like she was like resentful, or like something angered her about like 5 girls in the house or something. So if we're going to go along the lines with, and I think you guys are starting to pick up on my newest theory or avenue, I will lay it out in a pre-recorded video so it makes more sense, but that kind of just goes along with our live chat right now of, you know, something was strange when Ethan's mother like said something along the lines of like, one of 5 girls that lived in the house. Like, think about for females in the chat, sometimes they say 3's a crowd, right? And I've always found that to kind of be the case, like with girls, especially around the ages that the victims were in. Like, sometimes it's good to have just one girlfriend, and once you start adding in more, it's just, I don't know, just my experience. It can be a lot of personalities, and it just seemed like there was a lot of personalities with these girls, and I'm not saying there was competition, but it wouldn't surprise me. Okay, now back to the OJ trial.
For gate, landed on the other side, came around and released the hydraulic arm to the gate on Ashford and let the other detectives into the location.
Van Adder and Lang pretty much just went in and nobody answered the door at the main residence. And eventually they got at the pool bungalows, Cato Kalin to answer his door. Cato Kalin's a character. They talked to Cato Kalin for a brief minute, and all 3 of them go down to the last bungalow when Cato said, well, Arnell, OJ's daughter, is down at the last bungalow. So they all rushed down there. So I'm left with Cato. So, okay, I'll ask Cato some questions.
I believe one of the first things I asked him was, do you mind if I look around?
And I just want to reiterate too, the evidence totally points towards Kohberger. I just want to reiterate that. I do. And I don't think that DM is, you know, a killer. Just want to reiterate that also. So, because I know that people are saying like in chat, you know, but this or that. The DNA points to Kohberger. I totally agree with all that.
He replied, no. I think I asked him another question.
And what was that?
If anything unusual happened last night.
He says, well, there was an earthquake last night.
So why can you get away with getting up on the stand and saying something like that then?
Because you hadn't been cross-examined yet, and I don't interrupt.
As you were looking then at the outside of the residence, you were trying to determine what wall matched up with the outside of Cato's room?
Yes.
But I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I was talking to my girlfriend, and he gave a certain time. And all of a sudden, there was this big rumbling crash on my wall, and the picture actually shook right above my head. So I said, okay, and I knew full well there was not an earthquake the previous night.
Then after you passed through the second gate area, you saw the wall that appeared to match Cato's wall.
Yes.
Then what happened?
I continued walking down the path, and when I got approximately 15 or 20 feet away, I saw a dark object. I continued to walk forward towards that object. At some point, I could tell that it was a glove.
As I got closer, I shined my flashlight on it, and I could see it was clearly a glove.
And to circle it back to Kohberger's case, you know, Mark here finds the glove. Now it's going to be, I'm assuming, the same type of thing in Kohberger's case. Whoever found the sheath will be put up on the stand, and the defense is going to raise into question, like, when did you see it? How did you see it? Everything, as you guys know.
It looked damp. I also noted that it looked very similar to the glove at Bundy.
I at some point talked to Detective Van Adder and Lang, and I took Detective Van Adder back to the location.
I'll never forget what Van Adder said. He goes, this is a crime scene. Yeah. Like it wasn't before, and we've got possible blood on the Bronco. And I said, that's why we're here.
And that part is interesting because obviously it's a more recent interview of Mark, and he pretty much is undermining the very police work that he helped, build this case with. He's kind of questioning why the officer said to him, this is a crime scene. And he's like, well, yeah, and it's so condescending and arrogant, and it just points to still even himself saying well, yeah, of course, this is a crime scene. We got this, we got that. And it's he's almost admitting himself that they weren't on their game possibly. Do you know what I mean? And good morning, Candace, and everyone else who's joining.
So at the time that you found the glove, you still did not know where he was or where he'd gone or when he'd gone there?
No.
After you went out into the rear driveway and attempted to examine the alley for blood, what did you do next?
Well, we were walking, and I was trying to take mental notes.
What I remember the most about Mark Fuhrman was he was really confident. He seemed very assured and almost cocky.
Can you tell us whether...
Yes, Florida Bass Fishing said they messed up letting Fuhrman, or anyone for that matter, to find evidence alone. Yeah. He was by himself when he found the Bronco. He was by himself when he found this glove. And like you said, set up for planting evidence, especially having a history of being racist. Right. It just didn't. It was like the perfect storm for this case of, this guy's terrible background of stuff that they pulled out that's just wrong. And then the fact that he was by himself finding some of these things, his credibility was just crumbling. And not only that, like I said, there was a time period of evidence that wasn't logged correctly. So it was just every little thing that this Mark guy did, and again, just to tie it back, I'm assuming Ann Taylor is hoping to find some holes like this with the officers that she's requested training records on.
Whether you knew someone or met someone by the name of Kathleen Bell?
Yes, I can tell you. I did not.
At the center of the defense case was this argument that O.J. Simpson was framed by Mark Fuhrman, by Phil Van Adder, that there was a cover-up, and that was spurred by racism on the part of these police officers.
We already have people theorizing that, oh, well, Kohberger was framed. I get the comments all the time. I'm sure you guys see them. And they planted his DNA on the sheath, and it's easier to plant, I've had this comment, quote, it's easier to plant touch DNA on something easier than you think. And I'm like, what? So here, you know, like we've stated, them pulling his racist comments out worked for the defense. Kohberger's case, I don't foresee something like this happening. But like I said, the strategy that I believe that Kohberger's defense is going to do is just question how everything was handled, how you got to Bryan with the touch DNA on the sheath, every little step of the way, how that was sent to the lab, how it was carried there, who opened it, who worked on it, all that's going to be raised into question. So Florida Bass said they took OJ's blood sample and didn't check it in for 6 hours, and they find a chemical used to preserve blood in OJ's sock. Stupid to plant that evidence as it was proved blood was planted. And again, it just ties back to what we played earlier in the stream, them asking Fuhrman here on the stand, did you manufacture plant evidence in this case? And he pleads the fifth. Mind you, now he's doing interviews with that same question and he's saying no. Why couldn't you just say no when you were on the stand?
But you do recognize the name, don't you, sir?
Yes.
Well, they had some witnesses that were coming forward. A female that was trying to, I think she was trying to flirt with me, and I really wanted nothing to do with her. I didn't recall our conversation, but she said that I made some racial comments.
And how was it that you heard her name? In connection with what?
In connection with the allegations of statements I made to her at a date sometime in 85 or 86.
Were you informed about a letter she had written in July of 1994 after the preliminary hearing to Johnny Cochran?
Yes, I did.
Did the conversation Kathleen Bell describes in this letter occur?
No, it did not.
The letter from Kathleen Bell says she meets Fuhrman in 1985 or 86. She says during their conversation, he tells her that he wants to kill black people and that interracial couples disgust him.
I could see the writing on the wall, and it was fairly obvious from the onset that they could not actually challenge the evidence.
All right, Detective Fuhrman, could we ask you to step outside, please? Thank you.
Fuhrman's global attitudes toward race specifically, and in particular, couples that are racially mixed, such as Mr. Simpson and Nicole, is fair game for questioning, inasmuch as he is very definitively a suspect for having carried that glove from Bundy, where he found it, to Rockingham, where he deposited it. We intend to show in incident after incident that Detective Fuhrman was willing to violate the law and the federal civil rights statute to unfairly prosecute black men who he found in the company of white women, and that this pattern was consistent right up until shortly before.
I just have to pause it here because I want, again, I was very young when this was going on, but I do remember my parents watching this trial. But to see it now again, and maybe for you guys who watch this and to see it again, it's the theatrics, even with OJ in the background, like here when they're talking about the shady past of Mark, he rolls his eyes and throws his head back like he just can't believe what he's hearing. And like, it's entertaining to watch. I know that it's not an entertaining matter, but to see this trial, like in comparison to other trials that we've watched, this one is just out of this world. And I can see why everyone was so captivated by it.
This incident, in the extraordinary set of circumstances where the prosecution felt compelled to acquaint the jury with the fact that this witness required special training so he could control himself on the witness stand, we're entitled to show why that special training was and always will be necessary in his case.
This is the letter Kathleen Bell sends to the...
And see, they just called into question special training and why they should be able to go down this avenue because, you know, let me just rewind it just to kind of circle it back to what Ann Taylor is looking for and why she could possibly be asking for the training records.
Necessary in his case.
This
pattern was consistent right up until shortly before this incident. In the extraordinary set of circumstances where the prosecution felt compelled to acquaint the jury with the fact that this witness required special training so he could control himself on the witness stand, we're entitled to show why that special training was and always will be necessary in his case.
This is the letter Kathleen Bell sends to the defense. She says, quote, "Mr. Fuhrman may be more racist than you could ever imagine," end quote. She says Fuhrman told her he would look for a reason to pull over black men driving with white women, and that he would like to see all black people gathered together and killed. She also says Fuhrman repeatedly uses the N-word when talking about black people.
I mean, is that where this case is going? How far afield do we have to go on this witness? I mean, we have gone way out there in the past 10 years. Have you ever used a racial slur? And a woman who makes allegations about him 10 years ago, and what other cases he's ever testified in. And I mean, we have really hit the outer limits here. And this is far beyond the outer limits. This is the twilight zone. This letter really has no bearing on this detective's credibility, Your Honor.
His offer that it was a crime against nature for a black man to be with a white woman should in and of itself be enough to allow cross-examination on his racial bias.
See, this is just another, the prosecution just failed miserably in OJ's trial. Excuse me. Sorry, choking on my coffee over here. So why didn't the prosecution pull this themselves and see this before they put him on the stand? It's unbelievable. In 1983, he files a disability claim with LAPD, and he says he's stressed of being exposed to street gangs and criminals and have given him racist thoughts. It's just completely corrupt and completely idiotic of the prosecution to have known all this. Like, they just fumbled the entire case. And yes, it's absolutely terrible. Yeah, these LAPD officers had their own gang, absolutely. And again, I'm not saying that anything like this will happen in Kohberger's case. Obviously, it's totally different circumstances. But I do think, like I've said, that they're going to raise integrity and competency issues with the 3 officers that they've pulled training records from. And hopefully nothing pops up. Because sometimes the defense will just point at every little thing and you forget that the main thing is the DNA on the sheath right now. But they're trying to raise questions already, I think, with how that got there, the process it took to get there, and how they honed in on Kohberger. Thank you, MK. It sheds light on possible defense tactics. Thank you. I'm glad you understand where I'm going. And House Huddle says any lacking defense and accused doesn't stand a chance. Not bad if guilty, nightmare if innocent. Mm-hmm.
In the course of attempting to obtain a stress disability, he described stresses in the field. He had worked gangs, and he had used derogatory terms toward, I think, Latinos as well as African Americans, and this was part of his case to stress off of LAPD, which was something, unfortunately, at the time was fairly common. That request was denied. So we basically looked at it very clinically and we certainly felt we were prepared to deal with that aspect of Mark Fuhrman's background.
They will never be able to give this court an offer of proof. They haven't to this date. When the people have requested that they do so, give us an offer of proof. Show us how you're going to prove that this detective planted this evidence. They have not once been able to do so.
I'm not defending Mark Fuhrman, but I never, ever believed that he would do something like that.
Initially, we supported him. When he was getting slapped around before any of this other stuff came out, I said, Mark, I'm going to sit in the first row every day you're on stand. We're on your side. Well, once he gets caught with his pants down around his ankles and he's pointing in every direction but his own, all that changes.
These allegations get more outrageous by the minute. And I'm stricken again by the preposterousness of the claims of the defense.
Well, I was disappointed we lost the case.
Sure. Did it go a little further than that, Detective Fuhrman?
No, not at all.
Weren't you a little bit angry that you were being shoved out of a murder in your own territory?
No.
Didn't bother you a bit?
None.
F. Lee Bailey cross-examining Mark Fuhrman. That was a really iconic moment. You have to remember, defense attorneys, especially those who are high profile, who do these high profile trials, there is some amount of performance that's needed. It's a little bit different than the way prosecutors usually present evidence and present their case.
Detective Phillips, give us his exact order to you that accompanied the notice that you were out. What was the order?
Robbery homicide's taken the case.
Did he say, Mark, don't do any more work on this case?
No, I understood that.
When you walked down to the Bronco, did you ask permission from Lieutenant Van Adder before you did that?
Detective Van Adder? No.
I'm sorry, Detective Van Adder. Detective Phillips?
No.
Detective Wang?
No.
So this was on your own initiative?
Yes.
You weren't just being nosy, were you?
I don't think nosy. I was walking and I noticed something on the Bronco and I continued walking towards it.
Did you wipe a glove in the Bronco, Detective Fuhrman?
No.
You did not?
No.
Have you ever testified that there was blood in the Bronco?
I'm not sure if we testified to that in the prelim or not. From the statement he made, the crashing sound and the time that he heard it, combined with the blood in the Bronco, the way I was feeling is there's a possibility there could be another victim.
I said I couldn't see inside the car really well, just the back. There's a shovel and some plastic because the tint was reflecting back my flash. So now he had natural light and he cups his hands and looks in and he goes, there's blood all over the inside.
You then walked out the front.
I love in this episode, they show Mark contradicting himself. So they'll do it in other instances too.
Door.
Yes.
You had no direction from anyone to do that, did you?
No, I didn't.
This, again, was Detective Fuhrman on his own, was it not?
Yes.
You had an idea that you would like to check out Cato's claim that some unusual noise had occurred at about 11:15 that night on the outside of the wall of Cato Kalin's room.
That's correct.
Now, if that glove had been there where you say you found it, it would have been placed there by someone involved in the homicide. Isn't that conclusion compelled?
I would assume that, yes.
That would be a vicious killer of some sort, would it not?
Yes.
And you hung around for 15 minutes with no backup and no vest doing something. Is that correct?
No, it isn't.
Has anyone, to your knowledge, seen that glove there before your arrival?
Not to my knowledge.
Would you think it important that if the glove were in that location, the likelihood was that someone had placed it there who had been at Bundy?
Yes.
Did you think that whoever had dropped that glove might have left footprints?
I did not see any evidence of that, no.
Did you then cause 18 pairs of feet to trample that area before any criminals could get to it?
So this part here, you know, they're questioning who was inside the tape or who was inside the crime scene and all that prior to the tape and how the everything was closed down. The same thing I think will be questioned for Bryan's case, you know, and he's saying you let 18 feet stomp through this crime scene. The same thing's going to be brought up in Bryan's case. So they summoned friends over and they walked through this crime scene. How many walked through or how many people were there? How many set of shoes and footprints and all that, you know? So I could see something similar happening in Kohberger's case. And yes, Lamb's Bond, I will post it in the chat right now.
Eighteen pairs of feet. 2 Fuhrman, 4 Fuhrman and Phillips, 4 Fuhrman and Van Adder, 4 Fuhrman and Lang, and 4 Fuhrman.
Good point, House Huddle. Even though that case is still remained unsolved, she said the house contamination was also an issue in John Benet's case. Thank you for bringing that up.
And Rokar. Did you do that?
Yes, sir.
There was really no thought about anything about the glove. It looked like the glove at Bundy. There was nothing that indicated anything, how it was there, if it was thrown there, dropped there. The ground had leaves. There was no way to say if there was a shoe print. There was no other evidence. It looked fresh. There was no debris on top of it. There was no giant conclusions other than it looks like the glove at Bundy.
Did you believe that you would be an essential witness if you were the first to find an important piece of evidence?
Well, I couldn't make that determination at that time, sir. I didn't even know what the implication of the glove was.
Well, you told us the minute you saw it, you thought it looked like the one on Bundy, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
All
I
right.
thought it looked
Now,
like.
you're a trained detective. Tell the court, if you can, why the presence of the other murder glove from Bundy made you think that you were about to encounter a victim, Detective Fuhrman?
Because I didn't have anything to believe that there was a suspect there other than the bloody glove.
People talk about Fuhrman being one of the investigators. I suppose you could say that initially, but the reality was he was in and out on day one. He had nothing to do with this case after the first day, until the defense found out about him and used him as their foil.
Is that the sum total of the observations you made on that little excursion? How about a couple of gloves, Detective?
Excuse
Did
me?
you see a couple of gloves up there?
No, I saw one glove.
There's a problem that's been brought to your attention, isn't there, Detective Fuhrman?
No.
When discussing this event in the preliminary hearing and talking about the glove, his tongue slipped and you said them, didn't you?
Yes.
From that vantage point, you first observed the glove that you told us about?
Not first, no.
When did you first observe it?
There's a iron fence, and through that iron fence, you can get very close to the male victim. And looking there, I could see them down at his feet.
Not only the
So they're raising question like, why did you say this in the prelim hearing? But then now you're saying you didn't say, or you didn't see two of them there, you know? So they've raised questions so much with Mark's credibility, and Mark has done it to himself where he says different things at different times. Now, will that happen in Kohberger's case when they put DM on the stand and they say, you're in your police interview, you said blah, 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 blah. But here you're saying this, you know, so it could definitely not be good as far as questioning the series of events. And again, if there was a cop on the stand, they'll question like, so the first time you went through, you didn't see the sheath. And then it says you later found it, you know, so the cops' statements are going to be crucial in Kohberger's case for the defense, because the defense is going to use it to poke holes. And like I said, I believe OJ is guilty. I believe that Kohberger is tied to this crime. The DNA pretty much speaks for itself, but I just hope that they don't point in, like they did in the OJ case, to things, procedural issues.
The planning of evidence, a glove at Rockingham, is absurd. And I take affront to the point where I took 2 polygraphs. The idea was F. Lee Bailey would apologize to me for saying I planted evidence if I took a polygraph from his guy. Okay? I did that one on TV. And he said, you passed at the highest level I've ever seen anybody pass this polygraph. 1, I'm waiting for my apology. 2, I think it is such a disgrace that intelligent people with a doctorate in law would actually put the country and the legal system through such a charade for nothing more than their own ego to say, I won.
I just don't believe a word he says. Sorry.
As week 8 unfolds with the prosecution's star witness, Detective Mark Fuhrman, the defense is biding its time. They made no secret of their plan to attack Fuhrman as a racist who planted evidence. But the fury and thunder of legal legend F. Lee Bailey and his cross-examination of Fuhrman raises the bar on how to trap a witness in a lie.
There are some issues we need to resolve before he gets the witness stand in front of the jury.
How many total times have you met with either Mr. Darden, Ms. Clark, or anyone else in the prosecution team in connection with your testimony?
7 or 8 times.
7 or 8. Beginning when and ending when?
Various times this year.
Do you represent to this important jury that 3 lawyers asked you a total of 10 questions in this session?
Yes.
Do you know any lawyer on this earth who is capable of asking only 3 questions?
Not currently.
Touche. Now, do you have any memory of even one of these 10 questions?
No.
Not a single one?
No, sir.
And this happened when, Detective Fuhrman?
I believe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago.
2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Well, now you have been exhibiting a startling memory for detail of a crime that was 8 months ago, have you not?
Many people don't understand how lonely it was sitting up there knowing what was about to come.
It's questionable whether it was necessary for Mark Fuhrman to testify. Prosecution said they had to introduce him, they had to bring him on because he found the glove behind Cato Kalin's room on the Rockingham estate. But many experts in trial law say that the person who collected the evidence could have testified, that other people could have testified. So obviously, in hindsight, it was a really bad choice.
Tell us, please, what it was you offered these lawyers in that room about your vocabulary, Detective Fuhrman?
F. Lee Bailey's cross-examination of Mark Fuhrman was very dramatic. It was kind of like out of a movie. And it was a big moment in the courtroom because we knew that it was pivotal. Like the way that F. Lee Bailey was setting him up just seemed so like such a classic trap. And it was almost hard to believe, like, is he really just going to walk into this trap like that? But he did.
I don't use any type of language to describe people of any race, such as what is alleged by Kathleen Bell.
I also became a little angry and a little stubborn, and it's almost like F. Lee Bailey and I were there all by ourselves.
Right now, F. Lee Bailey has Mark Fuhrman right where he wants him. And watch what happens next. F. Lee Bailey uses that offensive word time after time after time. And he's doing it because every time F. Lee Bailey says it, Mark Fuhrman might as well be saying it. The jury is looking at him, and he is building Mark Fuhrman into being a racist by using that word over and over.
Did you tell the lawyers in that room that you never used the word? Oh, well,
It was never asked.
I'm asking, do you?
Do I what?
That's vague. Rephrase the question.
Do you use the word in describing people?
Presently.
Yeah. Oh,
No, sir.
have you used that word in the past 10 years?
Not that I recall, no.
And when F. Lee Bailey asked him if he had ever used the N-word in the previous 10 years, he was very, very definitive in saying that he had not, which was surprising to us in the media. We thought he would give himself a little wiggle room.
If he had said, yeah, of course I've said that. Am I ashamed of it? Sure. I was stupid, whatever he could have said. But he said, no, I've never used that word in my life. And nobody believed him.
I'm not sure I can answer that question the way you phrased it, sir.
And remember, then he gets brought back up on the stand, which we showed earlier, and he's asked, did you lie in your statements when you were up on the stand, or were you truthful? And he pleads the fifth. So, you know, he's like an admitted liar, just his integrity is down the drain, and it worked in the defense's favor in this specific case. Again, very different from Kohberger's case, but is there a direction that Anne is hoping to go in where she can paint the three officers that she's asked for training records on in a manner of, you know, they're shady, look at this, look at that, they're not to be trusted? Because remember, OJ said something along the lines of the reason, this is after the fact, the reason the jury didn't believe the prosecution is because they didn't trust the police. So I don't know.
The second that they didn't believe him on that issue, then there's a question, gee, if he's a racist, do you think he planted the evidence?
You know, just because there was a racist cop on there, it shouldn't be the reason why you consider it. But of course, he was very prominent, and he played a very prominent role in the investigation itself. And so to know that he had a certain prejudice or bias against the defendant right at that point, it just didn't bode well with me and how I looked at things at that point.
The defense's strategy is incompetence, racism, planting of evidence. It doesn't disprove guilt. Prove that I can't write search warrants, that I don't know how to do my job, that I don't understand chains of custody, rules of evidence, that I don't understand the Fourth Amendment. Then you may have an argument.
When Bailey used the N-word, I know that he wants to sensationalize his presentation.
The first time I dumped that word on him, he knew it was coming.
He has lied to this court. He's impeached by his own witness.
I asked that you put a stop to it. Either put Cordova on the stand.
Excuse me, Mr.
or stop her from
Bailey.
getting
Stand up
it.
and speak when it's your turn.
You mean if you called someone a you have forgotten it?
Every time the courtroom was electrified, every time the word was used, I got a lot of criticism for it in the press because in their trial wisdom, they thought I should have softened it up a bit. Well, that ain't the way the game is played.
I'm not sure I can answer that question the way you phrased it, sir.
You have difficulty understanding the question. I'll rephrase it.
Bailey knew what the answers were, and he had the evidence to back it up. So it was almost like he was toying with Fuhrman because he knew he had Fuhrman trapped.
And you say on.
And I agree, Lambsbond. Fuhrman was a thug and a criminal with a badge. So then why, again, to circle it back around to what I played earlier in the stream, why was he speaking on behalf of the Idaho case saying that I spoke with students and they told me Kaylee had a stalker? And they said, in regards to the surviving roommates, they said they heard noises, they heard partying, but they just locked their door.
So, you know, if he's this dirty cop, I guess we can fairly call him that. Why was he speaking on behalf of the surviving roommates and the narrative that Kaylee had a stalker? It's just very confusing to me. And good morning, Corey, and everyone else who has joined.
Your oath that you have not addressed any black person as a or spoken about black people as in the past 10 years, Detective Fuhrman.
That's what I'm saying, sir.
So that anyone who comes to this court and quotes you as using that word in dealing with African Americans would be a liar, would they not, Detective Fuhrman?
Yes, they would.
All of them, correct?
All of them.
All right, thank you.
I do believe that by him using it as often as he did, for me, it was like, oh, yeah, he's kind of grandstanding with using the word itself. It was pretty riveting, I'll say that for sure, especially in the context of in the courtroom like that. But again, it's a word that I heard often growing up as a kid, probably, but it was different to hear it in a courtroom environment where we were trying to decide a person's guilt or innocence at that point.
When I said to Fuhrman, anyone who comes into this courtroom and says you use that bad word would be a liar, is that correct? And he hesitated and he said yes. And I looked at him incredulously and I said, all of them? Which tipped him the fact I had an army outside the courtroom door. And the mistake he made was, yes, all of them.
It's an unquestioned statement that if we insert it, then all else is wrong. Then everything gets thrown out the window. So when you talk about race, the Simpson trial, Judge Ito really failed not only himself, he failed everything that he did before and everything he did after, because this is the only case anybody knew about. When he allowed the question, he eliminated the possibility of justice.
He not only made himself look bad, he made the police department look bad. He made all of law enforcement look bad. It was an embarrassment to testify in open court in front of 50 million people or more on live television.
They couldn't understand how a respected police officer planted a glove. I mean, who would do something like that? Because that's not their experience, you know? And the legacy, unfortunately, in the African-American community is that happens every day.
The fact that the officers did what they did in that case, I wasn't surprised about it at all. Because again, I was already aware by being a member of the African-American community myself, that there are people that have very negative encounters with the police.
And under what circumstances have you seen him?
I've seen him in the DA's office.
Mark Fuhrman was intelligent, good-looking, articulate police officer who presented himself as being able to assess what was happening in this case, presenting evidence in this case in a way that was rational and thoughtful. That's how he first came off.
And you say on your oath that you have not addressed any black person as a or spoken about black people as in the past 10 years, Detective Fuhrman.
That's what I'm saying, sir.
As the trial went on and as we learned more information about Fuhrman, that veneer kind of came off. F. Lee Bailey destroyed Mark Fuhrman on the stand. You know, he did more than back him in the corner. He backed him into a corner and then like crushed him.
There was discussion and somewhat of meeting of minds and hoping that we could prepare me for cross-examination. I don't think it achieved those goals.
But you said, Detective Fuhrman, that your concerns had nothing to do with the crime scene or the murder. They were something else.
Yes.
All right. What were the concerns, Detective Fuhrman?
Well, there's been numerous motions to bring in irrelevant evidence into this trial.
Irrelevant evidence?
Yes, sir.
Such as? Detective Fuhrman, what events did you have in mind when you spoke of irrelevant occurrences that you feared might be brought into court?
Kathleen Bell.
All right. And you say that that's irrelevant?
Yes.
He's a very arrogant individual. He's very self-absorbed.
Bailey has a way of putting it out there that sounded so strong, and Fuhrman just went right along with it.
It was just another knife to pull. It was another excuse, another arrow in the quiver that they could pull when somebody is guilty as sin. They can pull the race card, and then somehow you're 50% home.
And that's the other point too, is in the OJ trial, like he said, they were able to point at the race issue, and then they got they got OJ off for murder, even though most people believe that OJ is guilty. You know, they'll raise question in the integrity of the officers in Bryan's case,
and maybe in hopes that the jury will see something so shady and so corrupt with one of the officers tied to it that they negate the touch DNA found on the sheath. I'm not saying that that strategy is right, or I'm saying that it'll work, but I think that Anne and any good defense team will probably try to do anything. And that's what they do. Look over here at this bad guy. Look at this bad guy. Look what he's saying here and here. And look what he did here. I seen somebody already bring up one of the officers' names, and I can't scroll up and find it, but it was in reference to what I was saying that, okay, look into Officer Tolson of Idaho State Police. And this is one of the officers that Bryan's team is asking for training records on. He was involved in attempting to frame an innocent chiropractor in Idaho for the murders of another doctor. It's ugly. And I watched a bit of that, and it's legit. It's questionable police work, in my opinion, and it's an unsolved murder. They went after the wrong defendant. I was talking about it a little bit with my group chat, that it does look bad. And I'm assuming Anne's going to probably question that, or has already seen that before it was even brought on YouTube. But again, in OJ's case, it's totally different because the race issue really, really nailed it for Mark, and him pleading the fifth didn't look good either. Like, you just pretty much came up here, testified, and then in another time brought up on the stand, you have your lawyer beside you and you're being asked if everything that you just testified to was truthful, and you're pleading the fifth. Like, it doesn't look good. You know, it was the perfect storm for OJ. And while most believe he's guilty, he got off here. So either way, I think that any good defense attorney will go in the route of, well, let's look at this officer and what's in their past, and are they qualified to have handled this part of the investigation, which is kind of in reference to the training records they're going to pull up. Just like they stated on earlier in the stream when I read Jennifer Coffendorfer's tweet that Alex Erickson sent to me, it pretty much says that she would do the same when she's looking into things, to know that if the officer was qualified, say they did the interview, what was their training in the interview before the interview? Like, what was their schooling? Were they able to and equipped to handle this? So, and Jen Liu said Ann Taylor is going to use any and all available evidence to impeach all the testimony and evidence. Exactly. And she's doing what any of us would want done if we were on trial, you know? So it's going to be interesting. House Huddle says each case is different for sure, but we will see these tactics again. It's just a pattern. And that's been proven because you already see in some of the defense motions for Kohberger that they cite other cases. Like when they were talking about the touch DNA, and they cited a case with the last name of Green, and how some was found on some nightgown, and all that, you know, that they follow a pattern. They look up things that are similar, and they want to know, like, if they can reuse that same template. Even when Anne asked for the records for the training stuff, she said, I've done this in other cases, and they've handed them over. But the prosecution here has said that they're not willing to hand over these officers' training records. Now they got this court order, and the prosecution in Kohberger's case has until a deadline, July something. If anyone knows, let me know. But they have a deadline to hand over the training records. So they'll be getting everything they need in time of the trial. It's just a cat and mouse game, and just a little game with each other, chess game, if you will, more so, that they're going to make the defense work for it. And thank you so much for the super sticker, Karen. I hope you guys are enjoying a little flashback to the 90s, one of the best decades out there, and watch this OJ stuff, because I find it very interesting. And like I said, it could be a similar template that Ann Taylor will use in regards to questioning the integrity of the officers involved in the case. Yeah, exactly. That's true, Julia. It would be absolutely horrible if the killer could get off on an officer's record. That's the thing, is like, we've already seen it happen in OJ's case. And again, he's just a high profile celebrity. He had money.
people really liked him, you know, so it's totally different. Like everyone that's kind of talked about Kohberger has been kind of either they say like, yeah, he was okay, he was a nice guy, or they've been like, he was weird. We had him in our system at this restaurant as a creep, you know, so it's hit or miss also with Bryan's stuff that people know about him.
Not only did these alleged incidents never occur, but the purpose for which they're being admitted could never have occurred. And Max Cordova gave us a statement that says none of that.
Cordova says, hey, Rohr, your boy is here. And Fuhrman turns on Cordova and says, let's get something straight. The only boy here is you. And then Cordova leaves the building and Fuhrman follows him out into the parking lot and repeats the same epithet.
We've interviewed Max Cordova long time ago. He never made such a statement. And he never alleged that Mark Fuhrman ever made such a statement.
Max Cordova wanted to tell Mr. Darden and Miss Lewis about this incident, and they shut him off.
I definitely see what you mean, Julia. She said, I'm sick of hearing from YouTubers. They have no evidence. They don't have to hand over everything till the trial. And we saw that happen in Alex Murdaugh's case. Like he didn't know about that TikTok video until the trial. And then it was like, they were probably blindsided and like, how do we work around this? You know, so, or Snapchat video, I'm sorry. The Snapchat video in Alex Murdaugh case, they never were aware of until trial. And something bomb dropping could happen in Kohberger's case. You know, they'll hand it over, but you know, they have until the trial starts. Boom, here you go.
And that's what he will testify to. And Your Honor, I have spoken with him on the phone personally, Marine to Marine. I haven't.
And see here, let me just break this part down. He's just said Marine to Marine. He's talking about both of them being in the Marine Corps. And this defense lawyer for OJ is saying that he spoke to somebody who heard right out of Mark's mouth him use that slur. And he's saying Marine to Marine, I've spoken to him. Come to find out, which they'll show here, he lied right there. So when people say things like, oh, Ann said that there's no connection to Bryan and the victims, and Ann said that there was lack thereof DNA of the victims in Kohberger's XYZ, you guys know the areas. They can, just because they say it doesn't mean it's true. So, and then it's on the prosecution to be like, wait a minute, what? You know what I mean? So it's just a chess game. It's a back and forth game. And thank you so much, world class. O.J. Simpson was innocent. And I appreciate everyone's opinions. And again, I know that there's people who follow me who think that Bryan's innocent. And I just appreciate you guys being here. And again, I believe that everyone is innocent until proven so, or proven not to be in a court of law. So, and somebody, I don't get the notification on my end, but somebody said that they gifted memberships. So I just want to thank you so much. I don't know who it was. Let me pop back on the other screen. But yeah, pretty much I just want to say is just because they, oh, thank you, Caroline. It's so good to see you. Just because they say something in court and just because Ann Taylor said something in one of the motions doesn't make it true, really. Like this, sometimes lawyers just lie. Like they're going to show here, OJ's lawyers had no problem just being pulling out every card, even if it meant lying in front of the jury.
The slightest doubt that he'll march up to that witness stand and tell the world what Fuhrman called him on no provocation whatsoever.
You know, Your Honor, all we're getting here is a lot of very dramatic posturing. Because when these witnesses take the witness stand, if they ever do, the court is going to see a very different story than what Mr. Bailey has laid out for the court today. You can rest assured, I want this film clip saved forever because this is going to be very funny.
I have spoken with him on the phone personally, Marine to Marine.
No, I have not talked to F.Lee Bailey.
Never talked to him?
No.
You know who F.Lee Bailey is?
Yes.
Pretty distinct fellow.
Yeah.
Pretty distinct voice.
Correct.
So you haven't talked Marine to Marine to F.Lee Bailey?
No.
It's very clear what he said to the court and what he was intending to convey.
I do not appreciate being called a liar in any court.
He was intending to convey to the court that he had personal knowledge of what this man said because this man said it to him personally, Marine to Marine.
And I will ask at the proper time for correct action to be taken.
And then they have, well, this means this. And oh, no, that means that. I feel like we're in Alice in Wonderland. We've got Jabberwocky here.
The proper way to proceed, if there was any claim of misleading the court, would be to put the witness on the witness stand under oath.
I think that Mr. Bailey should be cited for contempt and fined substantially.
What they eliminated from the tape that I saw on NBC News this morning was that Stone Phillips said, "Why didn't you mention these things before?" He said, "I only give very narrow answers to every question."
He has lied to this court. He is impeached by his own witness.
I asked that you put a stop to it. Either put Cordoba on the
Excuse
stand
me, Mr.
or
Bailey.
stop her from taking
Stand
it.
up and speak when it's your turn.
You're being penalized at this point merely under the procedure of the California Evidence Code, which says prior inconsistent statements can be offered in one of two ways.
And that's a problem too. And thank you so much for the super sticker, Julie. I really appreciate you and all your guys' support. And thank you again, Caroline, for gifting memberships, and welcome to the new members. Once the lawyer or somebody says something on the stand that isn't true, or they try to take it off the record, it's too late. The jury's heard it. So that sort of happened a lot in the Johnny Depp trial. Do you guys remember when a witness would be on the stand and they'd object to it and they'd say, strike it from the record? It's kind of too late sometimes. So I think even though the defense kind of gets reprimanded for lying in that one instances here, it's kind of too late. And now, like Jen Liu said, I need to understand the no connection. And now it's like, I need to understand the context of no connection. I agree. And now everyone's heard something like that being stated. There's no connection, you know? So even with this gag order, the defense has found a way to kind of paint a narrative themselves and seems to be in a legal manner.
Either the witness is confronted or the witness is still available to be prosecuted.
But it might not be
That's how we're
true.
going to do it. Thank you, sir.
All right, no more objection, please.
Noted. I think it would be appropriate to begin this session by both sides acknowledging going beyond the bounds of professional conduct.
I do extend to Mr. Bailey my apology for the extreme nature of the exchange yesterday. I don't anticipate that happening again. And I think that we will all, from this day forward, conduct ourselves as professionals, seasoned professionals that we all are.
Mr. Bailey?
I, without hesitation, apologize for what I have found as an unwarranted comment directed at Ms. Clark, and that was that her eyesight and memory were deficient. Very plainly, that was unfair, since her eyesight is excellent and her memory has proven to be the same.
Detective Fuhrman, did you know whether any fibers from the Bronco would be found on that glove that you ultimately found at Rockingham?
No.
And did you know the cause of death?
No.
I have nothing further.
She gave up. You've got to do some redirect. You can't just let me be butchered by the defense.
All right, Detective Fuhrman, I'm going to release you from further testimony today. However, you are still subject to recall. You are ordered not to discuss your testimony with anybody except your own attorney and the attorneys from both sides or their investigators. Do you understand the order, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Your excuse, sir.
I just said, it can't be this screwed up. It can't be. This is like, I mean, introducing race into this would be like introducing sexual preference into a motive. I mean, it really has nothing to do with anything. I was put in a position that many say I deserved. And to me, I thought about one thing when I was sitting there, and I go, you dumb son of a bitch. You should have never done a good job. You should have never answered that phone.
All right, Detective, part of the court's orders, you agree to return within 72 hours of being notified. Do you understand the order? Yes, sir. All right, thank you. And you'll give the court plenty of notice. Yes. All right.
Week 8 of the O.J. Simpson trial ends with Detective Mark Fuhrman stepping out of the witness box and into his.
Well, I just want to thank you guys all for being here today. And I hope you kind of liked what I laid out. Pretty much, I just think that in OJ's case, while I do believe that he's guilty, the defense worked the angle of calling into question the integrity and the competency of the LAPD. Of course, that case is entirely different with the race aspect, but I do think that any good defense lawyer will kind of pull through these training records that she's asked to get, and she's going to try to, raise question of the competency pretty much. And if there's anything on these records or anything that she can bring up in court that looks bad, she'll do it. And they do it in a lot of cases. So I just really appreciate you guys. And I thank you, Mel Mac. That really means a lot. I just also am confused why Mark came out kind of defending the roommates in the Idaho case and had knowledge of things that none of the public had knowledge of. It just makes me question, how he got that information. He says he spoke to a student and they said that Keely had a stalker, all while the public was also being told by Moscow police that they don't have any evidence of a stalker. He was telling the public that the surviving roommates heard noises and they thought it was partying, so they locked their door. And to me, it's just kind of downplaying the fact that it's odd, because now we know that Dylan saw a lot more and heard a lot more than partying and noises. It's odd that she didn't call 911. And I just don't trust that he was out there on Fox pushing the narrative of like, oh, well, she heard noises, but she locked the door. Now that we know there's much more, it's like, why was he trying to downplay it to everybody? Because you know how many people watch Fox News. So I just don't trust the narratives that Mark was kind of pushing on Fox News. I know a lot of people are saying, well, he just likes the limelight and all that, but I still think that it's questionable that he knew some information and was trying to push a narrative that's just kind of strange. And it appears not true at all, because we know that she didn't hear partying noises, and we know that there's been no evidence of a stalker. And even Kaylee's family first said, yes, there was a stalker. And then they came out with Brian Enton saying like, no, they said that they didn't know of a specific one. So I don't know why exactly Mark's pushing the theories that he was, but I think that it's questionable. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you. I am going to record my new theory in the case. I'm a little nervous to share it. I hope you guys understand that I do believe that Bryan Kohberger is tied to this, but I do think that there's a little bit more that I'm starting to see when it comes to DM. And I just hope you guys, I respect all of your guys' opinions. Anyone who thinks OJ is innocent, I respect your opinion. I disagree. Anyone who thinks Kohberger has been framed, I respect your opinion, but I disagree. And thank you everyone who has donated. I don't know if Doug's still listening, but thank you so much. And Caroline for gifting membership, and everyone else, Julia, who sent super stickers and super chats. Karen, thank you guys so much. And just hit the like button. And yeah, I'm going to lay it out, my new theory, in a way that I can source why I believe that. And it's taking me a minute to kind of clip law enforcement statements as well as media statements. And again, it's just a theory. I'm not saying that it's the truth. I'm not saying it's the avenue I'm going down, but I've just opened my mind to a new direction when it comes to DM. So again, I will see you guys soon. I'll see you in the YouTube streets. And yeah, that'll be on CDT's channel, Alex Erickson, Jen Liu, House Huddle if she goes live, everyone, all the YouTubers, Titanium Built, who are in my chat that I follow as well. We can all chat in their chats too. So thank you so much. You guys have a great day. Bye, Roxanne and CDT, Lambs Bond. Thank you so much, everyone.